It is the third and final winner of the 2023 Orimeda Contest, finally joining the game with Harry Rabbit and Dead Dog. It is QON00 Night Queen, with a kit of Full Charge, Hyperbeam, Suction, Flight Legs, and the leg ability of Charm, which reduces damage taken when the attacker is of the opposite gender. Now, as a model that's not only a third and final fan design of the batch of 3, but also a spotlight on top of that, Night Queen is bringing a lot to the table that, even though we have seen a good chunk of it already, is making a good chunk of these options now at last available for female teams, which has been a really big struggle for a while, especially when competitive meta is involved, such as with metaphor strategies or anything of the like. Night Queen finally coming onto the stage will finally be putting an end to those problems with her free kit, especially with none of her parts being heavy on top of that. Full Charge on the head part is a very special skill that any metal can use, but simply explained, upon use it will sap the user's head HP up to about 50% when fully capped at 5-star, and fully cap their Metaforce gauge at 100%. This means that you can go for a 2-turn Metaforce nuke or a 2-turn Metaforce Reliant nuke, such as with Hyper Beam as she comes equipped, or Beam Sword, or Microwave, or Microshock, or anything similar that you can think of that's Metaforce Reliant. Full Charge makes it incredibly easy to make use of those without having to wait for charge to build up. But that honestly is kind of preaching to the crowd, because everyone who's played longer than, say, a month already kind of knows this is a very special skill to make use of, and very much so worth capitalizing on. Hyperbeam on the right arm is a shooting skill with an optic attribute, meaning it has a ×2 damage bonus at 30% charge, and a ×3 bonus at 100% charge, and in addition to this, also has passive pierce damage, which sets it above even Beam in some cases, even though they share the same damage outputs. Plus, as I mentioned, Night Queen is bringing not just a free Full Charge into the Spotlight pool, but also a free Hyper Beam to the Spotlight pool as well, not just as a free model anyone can go after, but also for female models, as I mentioned. So this will make a lot of really good changes, especially when mono-female teams are involved, or even for PvP, you can finally make use and capitalize on. Suction on the left arm is another shooting skill that doesn't necessarily focus on Metaforce Reliant to a point, but instead focuses more on mobility control. Instead, upon use of Suction, it will pull the enemy closer to Night Queen while she's on the field. Now, this can be a double-edged sword in some cases, though, as it means that if you catch them in their cooldown phase, it will progressively stall them, yet essentially another full turn, as long as you can keep it up for a perma-stun in this case. But if you mistime it and catch someone in their heat phase, you may instead accelerate their heat phase and drag them all the way to the center line to pretty much take their turn right then after without having to wait. And at that point, it can be kind of a gamble as long as you know how to juggle it. Flight Legs mean that she'll have moderately good coverage when it comes to most terrains, but compensate for it with good high speed and evade. That being said, though, with an evade of 888, she's definitely packing a very good base speed, essentially par for the course for most flight-based legs, and an evade of 1479, almost 1500, means she will have a pretty good time dodging or grazing a lot of incoming attacks. Of course, though, this does also mention that you need to be incredibly careful with anyone using anti-air or anything of the like, as that will absolutely down this Queen of the Night sooner than she'd really need to be. However, that is essentially where all the good points on her end. With an armor rating of 2950 for the head, 2750 per arm, and just shy of 3k for the legs means she is going to be incredibly light on armor. And on top of that, she's packing paper defenses at best, with a melee resist of 746 and a shoot resist of just barely 546, and a shoot resist of just barely 500 means she is going to be taking a very notably higher amount of damage from incoming shooting and melee attacks, which means if you are going to use Night Queen, exercise great caution and make sure you keep her protected at all times, just so that she does not die too quickly on the field. All this being said, though, as a pure set score, I still do have to rate her a pretty high rating at about a 7 out of 10. Not just the fact that her kit between Full Charge and Hyperbeam synergize very, very well, obviously, but even for having paper armor and paper defenses, the Charm leg ability does kind of help this out just a little bit, as a good chunk of bots in the game are all mostly male at like 70% or so, if just throwing a number out there, and this does mean she can't guarantee a moderately high chance of a free damage reduction. But if the opposing enemy is, of course, a female, then that goes out the window. All the same, though, she is a very powerful model, and not only as a spotlight, but as a female model, bring a lot of new skills to the female role to make building female teams a lot easier across the board for PvP, for competitive meta, or anything else that may demand it. As mixed parts, I do very easily have to rate her a 9 out of 10, and that's honestly me being really judgmental in this case and trying to take a lot of her flaws into account. Again, given the very light armor and the paper defenses of her legs, mean you want to exercise a lot of caution if you are going to use her on the field. But if you are going to use her and you properly prepare for it with a defender, or someone who can keep the damage as low as possible, then Night Queen can absolutely shine between Full Charge and Hyperbeam, and maybe toss something in there on that left arm or a better leg for better defenses to help kind of complement that kit as a whole.